Masechet Pesachim, Daf Mem Aleph, fantastic daf, a lot of very interesting topics. We begin with the Mishnah. En notnin kemach letoch haroset or letoch ha-chardal. One may not take flour and put it and add it to the haroset. Haroset here does not mean the haroset that we use, dip the maror in, but haroset means any dip. And here it's referring to the dip that they would use for the meat of the Korban Pesach. This is something made out of, had a sharp taste, an acidic taste with vinegar in it. Vinegar has dual properties. On the one hand, we saw earlier that vinegar can actually stop the chametz process, and so that would be positive. But if it's like fruit juice, then it can actually increase it. So one should not put kemach in the haroset. Haroset probably also is made with water. So you have this vinegar-water combination. If you put flour in it, then the flour may become chametz. So therefore, don't mix it. Also, don't mix it into the mustard. Even though mustard has a sharp taste, and that sharpness will probably decelerate the chametz process, but it sounds like it also has water in it, and so this is a problem. However, if you see that someone did put flour in it, b'diavad, eat it right away before it becomes chametz. That's Tanakama. The Rabbi Meir oser. Rabbi Meir says, if you did, even if it happened already, burn it, get rid of it. It's no good. Okay, that's case A. Case B. The first case relates to chametz, which is the whole perek was about. But now that we're talking about dipping things, putting some flour inside something else, we go on a tangent for Korban Pesach. Even though the laws of the Korban will come up in later perakim, here we have we're going to go on an extended detour about it. We all know that the Pesach sacrifice has to be roasted, barbecued, no other ingredients. And so not only can it not be boiled in water, it also may not be boiled in other liquids like honey or oil, and not in fruit juice. However, what you can do is while you're roasting it, you can baste it with fruit juice, or after it's cooked, you can dip it in honey, oil, fruit juice. That's okay, as long as it's basically being roasted by itself and not boiled inside any other juice. Third law, because the common denominator is all different things that we do with liquids, and so now the baker's water that they use, they keep putting their hands in the water to cool off their hands, to get some moisture. Since they have dough all over their hands, that dough is going to go into the water, and so that water, it all has to be gotten rid of. You have to pour it out, because it is chametz. It can cause chametz itself. So we have three laws here. Number one, flour in water in an acidic mix is a problem. Second, cooking the Pesach in juice is a problem. And third, the baker's water you have to get rid of. The Gemara will go through each of these three, A, B, and C. Short discussion on A. B, we'll see, is going to have a long discussion, and I'll come back to this when we get there. So first, the flour in mustard, you can eat it, b'diavad. And everyone seems to agree with that. But what about the flour in haroset? That actually is a machloket between Rav Kahana and Shmuel. Let's see what they're arguing about. Amar Rav Kahana, machloket letoch hachardal. This machloket here between the Tanakama and the Rabbi Meir. Tanakama says, b'diavad, eat it right away. If some flour fell into the haroset, eat it right away. Rabbi Meir says, don't do it. That only applies to the haroset, which is less acidic. It just has some vinegar in it, but it has a lot of water in it. So machloket chardal. The machloket only applies to mustard. Mustard is very strong, very acidic, and so it's not going to cause a lot of leavening. In that case, Tanakama says, b'diavad, eat it right away. Haroset, however, is less pungent, and therefore it's not going to reduce the leavening process. It has water in it, but just a little bit of vinegar. And therefore, although Tanakama says here, eat it right away, that was only going on the mustard. Haroset is more stringent. If something some flour fell into haroset, burn it right away. Okay, good.
Rabbi, I'm sorry. What is the little nh on the English after the immediately?
NH is telling you it's a note that here it's taking you to the side. Halacha, H is for halacha. There's a halacha about this, and N is a note about the background knowledge. Here,
okay,
and
thank
here, and N is notes. H is halacha. L is
so
for
there's
language.
One. Oh, there's one and one notes and a halacha.
There's a note on this and a halacha on this. It's like it's a footnote. Okay, this is found in the Hebrew also. The Hebrew Steinsaltz has all this, and so here they're actually just translated all of the Hebrew notes, which is very nice. Okay, the notes in the Steinsaltz are often excellent because they often bring in interpretations that you won't find on the page on the Rashi Tosafot, other interpretations that are very, very good. Also, it's nice to have the halacha l'maaseh right there on the page. Okay, so v'tanyana mehachi, we have a baraita that backs up what Rav Kahana says. It's always interesting when Amorah says something, and then we have a baraita that says the exact same thing, right? Why the Amorah have to say it if there is a already explicit baraita? It seems that Amoraim did not know all of the baraitot, and so Rav Kahana had a tradition that this is how we interpret the Mishnah, or he came up with this on his own, right? Or more likely he had a tradition, and he didn't know that this was a baraita, and now someone else comes and says, oh, actually this was originally a baraita, so it has better authority. The baraita says, "En notnin kemach letoch haroset v'natan yiseref miyad." According to this, everyone agrees haroset is only a little bit acidic, so it's more problematic. It has water in it and only a little acid. It's going to cause leavening to the flour that goes in it, and the acid is not enough to stop it. Therefore, burn it right away if some flour falls into the haroset. However, letocha chardal is more lenient because it's very pungent, and that will not become leaven. Rabbi Meir omer yiseref miyad. Chachamim omrim ye'achel miyad. So Rabbi Meir is stringent on both cases. He says burn it right away. Chachamim, however, say b'diavad. If some flour went into the mustard, just eat it right away before it will become leaven. Good. Amar Rav Huna bered Rav Yehuda. Amar Rav Nachman. Amar Shmuel. Halacha kedibrei chachamim. That is a separate step, separately from Rav Kahana. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehuda, said to Rav Nachman, in the name of Shmuel, that the halacha follows chachamim, the more lenient ones that says who say eat it right away. Now, Rav Nachman said back, Rav Yitzchak said back to Rav Huna, bered Rav Yehuda. Did Shmuel know about this halacha that we just said before, this limitation? Haroset ka'amar mor, or achardal ka'amar mor? When Shmuel says halacha is chachamim, did he mean that also for haroset, that we can be lenient on haroset and eat it if it falls in? Or did he mean, no, only on chardal do we follow chachamim, because chachamim only applied their law that you can say eat it regarding chardal, which is what Rav Kahana and the baraita said. So which one did Shmuel mean? He said, what's the difference? Right? You see that they didn't have the section over here before. So they're quoting it for themselves again. So we're re-quoting Rav Kahana. The Rav Kahana, the Amar Rav Kahana, machloket letocha chardal, aval letocha haroset divrei kol yisaref miyad. Right? It makes a difference what Shmuel meant, because did he know about Rav Kahana? Would he have agreed with it if he did know about it? Who said that the whole controversy is only regarding mustard, but regarding haroset, everyone says you burn it right away. And so he answered him, Shmuel did not agree. I did not hear about that. In other words, I don't agree with that. So according to this tradition in the name of Shmuel, it would be fine to eat the flour that fell into either mustard or haroset. In other words, Shmuel did not have that baraita and did not agree with that limitation of Rav Kahana. So Shmuel is more lenient in this case. He says, in fact, I have a proof that Rav Kahana, the more limited one, makes sense. Amar Shmuel, and halacha kedebi yoseh. Shmuel himself, who just said this on the previous page, he said we do not follow the biyoseh. What did the biyoseh say? The biyoseh said that vinegar prevents something from becoming leaven. Right? If you some flour fell into a pot, put some vinegar and it'll stop it. And Shmuel said we do not follow that. So therefore, my love samutehu de la samit ha hamoe mehamea. So therefore, you see that the vinegar, well, according to Shmuel, the vinegar will not stop it, will not shrink it. No, this is, I remember talking about if some water water fell on a grain, and it starts to get bigger and bigger. And Rav Yosef said, put some vinegar on it, and it'll stop it. It'll stop it from becoming chametz. So fine, it will. He disagrees. Shmuel disagrees with Rav Yosef, so it will not stop it from getting bigger, but. Will it also cause it to leaven? No. Who says that it will? And therefore, it would make sense to follow Rav Kahana, but that's not necessarily true. No, it doesn't cause the wheat to shrink, nor does it cause it to leaven. And therefore, haroset can be the same law as the mustard. And so there's no reason to agree with Rav Kahana to be more stringent regarding the haroset. Okay, so in the end, we have here two interpretations of our Mishnah. Rav Kahana says that according to Tanakama, you have to burn according to Takama, the mustard you can eat. Everyone agrees with that. But how about the flour that went into haroset? According to Rav Kahana, even everyone agrees. Even Tanakama says you have to burn it, whereas Shmuel says you can eat it, even according to the sages, not according to the Bimei, who says you have to burn everything. All right, so that's regarding flour that falls into a mixture of water and an acidic compound. Now we're going to talk about Korban Pesach, a lot of interesting cases. So, okay, good. We know we have to roast it. We have to barbecue it, the Korban Pesach. But what about all the various nuances here? What about boiling it in juice? We're going to see that that's liable. How about in a pot with no water? Is that called boiling or roasting? That'll be machloket. How about if I roast it first and then boil it? We're going to see that that's liable. Second number of cases is what if I burn it? Not only roast it, I burn it. I roast it too much and I burn it. Not liable. How about if it's raw? Not liable, but undercooked is liable, which is strange, right? If I eat it raw, that's you're not allowed to do it, but not chayav, wouldn't be chayav malkut. But undercook is not good. You gotta cook it just right. Boiling without a fire. How do you boil without a fire? We'll see. That would be liable. And we'll talk about the multiple prohibitions that are involved in this case. Compare that to nazir. Fifth case is eating undercooked before sunset. That's not liable. How about if you boil it before sunset? How about if you roasted it before sunset? Okay, so a lot of really interesting variations in cases, and we'll see how they derive everything from the Pesukim. Okay, and mebashelin, you cannot boil the Pesach in any other liquid, not only water. Tanu Rabbanan, how do we know this? B'mayim, en li ela b'mayim, shar mashkin minayin. So the Pasuk says, do not boil it in water. How do I know? It only says water. Maybe boiling it in juice is okay. Boiling. One time my cousin made Coca-Cola roast beef. Nobody liked it. But how about if you wanted to boil it in Coca-Cola? Would that be allowed? The Torah only says water. So how do we know that other juices is also not allowed? Amart kal vachomer umamayim she'en mefigin ta'aman asurin shar mashkin she'mefigin ta'amad lo kol sheken. Okay, so assuming the reason why you can't boil it is because you're introducing another ingredient. You have to have only the Korban Pesach with nothing else. And by boiling it, you're adding water. So if I'm not allowed to add water, which does not take away anything from the taste, well, doesn't change the taste at all, then all the more so, I can't put juice, which is certainly going to reduce the taste of the pure Korban Pesach. Okay, that makes sense. That's a Kal Vachomer. However, that's Tanakama. The B Omer, a different derivation. B'mayim en li ela mayim. Shar mashkin minayin tamod lomar ubashel mevushal mikol makom. Right? It says yes, you have to don't eat it bashel mevushal b'mayim. So the double language, it could have just said don't eat it mevushal b'mayim. The double language comes to teach you in any way, not only in water, but boiled, no matter how you boil it, even with other liquids. Okay, so the first derivation of Kal Vachomer. The second one is from the extra language, but they agree on the halacha. There's two different derivations. So since they agree on the halacha, what's the difference? We're learning from one way or the other. My benaihu, ika benaihu, seli kedar. What if I roast it in a pot with no liquid? The roasting a barbecue is on a spit, and now you allow all the juices to drip down. But what if I put it in a pot and it's cooking in its own juices? Is that a problem or not? Well, if you say bashel mevushal, that means no cooking at all. It has to be only roasted, and this would be a problem. If you say, according to this, the first opinion, the problem is introducing other ingredients. In this case, I'm not introducing any other ingredients, not even water, not juice. And so it's cooking in itself, it's still just Korban Pesach. So according to that, it would be okay to cook it in a pot with nothing else. So that's the difference between them. Okay, good. Now, since we do have this double language, right? You learned it from a kavachomer. Well, what will you learn from the double language? This is a very interesting question because these two opinions here are also appear in the Tanaitic Midrash, the Mechilta. And in the Mechilta, the first opinion is that of Rabbi Ishmael. Mechilta is from the school of Rabbi Ishmael, and the second opinion is quoted in the name of Rabbi Akiva. Now that's significant because Rabbi Akiva derived things from double languages. Rabbi Ishmael said, "Dibra Torah kilshon ben Adam." Torah speaks in normal language, and you do not derive anything from double language. That's just normal, natural language. And so, actually, in the original, Rabbi Ishmael is learning from Kal Vachomer because he prefers learning from Kal Vachomer. That's the best way to learn things. And he would not learn anything from Bashem Mevushal. Okay, but in this iteration, the way it's quoted here in the Gemara, it's not in the name of Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva, but rather Tanakama and Rabbi. And so the Gemara and the Bavli is assuming that everyone would learn something from Bashem Mevushal. So if you're not learning this law about liquids, about juices, then what do you learn from Bashel Mevushal? So my Avdilehu, mi ba'ile lichedatanya, בשלו ואחר כך סלעו, או שסלעו ואחר כך בשלו חייב. Is teaching us that, let's say I boil it first and then roast it, or roast it and then boil it. That also I am liable. I'm violating the Torah, which said only roast it and not also boil it. So bashel mevushal, not in any roasting, not any boiling, not boiling before, not boiling after. Okay, let's analyze this baraita. Bishlama bishelo v'achar kach selao hayav daha bashele. And I understand the case where I boil it first and then roast it, because after all, I boiled it. The main cooking I did was at first when I boiled it. So obviously that would be liable. But if I roasted first, so I cooked it properly, everything is good. So who cares if I boil it after? You're going to tell me that the boiling that I do after it's already fully roasted is going to somehow undo the roasting, right? Why should it be a problem? So it could actually be a problem. According to the Bioseh, this is a problem. We're going to compare this to chametz, boiling chametz after it's baked. The Tanya yosin bedakik hashadoy bivusha shelo nimoach dibre Rabbi Meir. This is actually a practical halacha. What if you have masa that's very hard, it's too hard to eat, and you want to soak it in water to make it soft? So if it's shadoy, if it's soaked, or even if it's cooked, you take the masa and you boil it to make it so after it's already baked. It's fine as long as it doesn't disintegrate. There's a halacha that you have to eat the masa. You can't drink the masa that's mixed into water, that's dissolved into water. So it's fine. Even if it's soft, it's okay. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion, but Rabbi Yosef does not agree. Rabbi Yosef omed yosin bedakik hashadoy. If you just soak it, that's okay. Aval lo bimvushal afa pi shelo nimoach. But you can boil the masa even if it doesn't dissolve. You see, according
Rabbi,
to
are you talking just about the chiyuv matzah the seder, or the whole?
Just the chiyuv masa, right? So that if it's even if it's baked and finished, you're finished baking, it's in the store, you bought it, took it out of the box, and now you go and boil it. The boiling somehow undoes the baking, and so therefore that is a problem. So just like with masa, the boiling undoes the baking. So too regarding Korban Pesach, although you roasted it first and now everything was fine, boiling it after actually causes it to be a problem. Okay,
so this is not
right on point.
Yeah, sorry. This is not Gebroxton.
That's what I was just about to say, right? Saul's question was right on point, because really this is only talking about the chiyuv of eating masa, which you would not fulfill if it's dissolved. That's the main point here. But there is a tangent which we learn, which is that this is also the source of gebrutz. If you can pronounce it, then you have to follow it. Right, which is you cannot make masa wet at all, because perhaps even making it wet after it's baked can somehow cause it to leaven. And yes, this is the source for that halacha, which we thankfully do not follow, because if according to that you can't even make matzah balls. So what's the point? Okay. Ola amad afilu temad bimeir. So now this we were trying to explain this baraita here, that even roasted and then boiled is not allowed, and we said that makes sense according to the Biyoseh. But what about not according to Bimeir? Because he says you can boil it after, and Ula says it even makes sense according to the Bimeir. We don't want the Braita to be only according to one opinion. Regarding Korban Pesach, it's more strict than just matzah, because Korban Pesach says bashel mevushal. Don't boil it at all, ever. Not before, not later, not during. No boiling. Whereas we don't say that regarding masa. All right, very good. So that's now that's the first topic here of juice, and we said in a pot with no water, that would be a machloket between the two derivations: roasting and then boiling, boiling and then roasting. That is liable according to everybody. All right, now what if you burn it? Tenor banan kol sarko chayav. Kol sarko really means that as much as it needs, but in this case it means even more, really actually burnt. Can it be that you would be chayav because you didn't roast it nicely, properly? Talmud lomad al tochelu mimenu na ubashem vushal b'mayim. Na ubashem vushal amarti lecha velo sheselao kol sarko. The pasuk only prohibits with lashes someone who has it na, which we're going to see is translated as undercooked, or boiled. Only those two things. But as long as you roast it, even if you overcook it, you're not liable. And so what does it mean? You actually make it entirely burnt, so there is no prohibition to burn it, because it's still roasting, it's just roasting a lot. All right, next baraita. There's a whole series of different baraitot that are different combinations of ways of cooking. Tanu Rabbanan, yachol achal kezayit hai yeheh chayav. What if I eat it raw? Now you might think raw would be a problem. Let me show you the pasuk. Right, we're going to all dealing here with these two pasukim in Shemot Yud Bet. V'achelu et habasar b'layla zeh seli esh umasot al merurim yocheluhu. This is a misvat aseh. You must eat it roasted. And then we have a lo ta'aseh. Al tochelu menu na ubashem vushal b'mayim ki im seli esh rosho al kerav al kirbo. So na we usually translate as raw. Do not eat it raw, and do not eat it cooked in water. That's the double language here, but rather only roasted. Okay, so although na usually means raw, the Gemara is interpreting it to mean undercooked. So as opposed to chai. Chai means raw. Okay, so if I eat it totally raw, can it be that I will be liable? I'm not allowed to, but do I get lashes? Talmud omar al tochelu mimenu na ubashem vushal. Na ubashel amarti lecha velo chai. Only these two ways are prohibited and liable, if it's undercooked or boiled, but raw is not included in the full prohibition that would be liable to lashes. Yachol yeh mutar. Maybe you think it's actually allowed to do it, to eat it raw. Talmud omar ki im seli esh. After all, the pasuk does come back and say only roasted. So only roasted. Only roasted means you do have to roast it, and therefore you may not eat it raw. So it's a prohibition, but a prohibition without lashes. What does na mean? What does undercooked mean? Amarav kidamre parsae abarnim. All right, so this is a Persian word, abarnim, which means cooked halfway, half roasted. That would be if it's less than half roasted, it's not good. So it got to be at least half roasted, and even if it's burnt, you can eat it that way. Good. Amar Rav Chisda.
What's the incentive of the Gemara to change? Like, isn't it obvious that na means raw? Why are they going out of their way to change it? They know
Yes,
no.
good question. Good question. I was wondering that. I think they're limiting they want it to be cooked well, and so if you say raw means raw, then if you cook it a little bit, it's not raw anymore, right? And so I guess they're more afraid that you're gonna undercook it. They want it to be really roasted nicely. So better to err on the side of burnt than undercooked. But although you're right, they really could say raw and undercooked, right? But maybe it can't serve two purposes, so they want to focus on the undercooked part.
So no rare meat.
No rare, no, you can't have it black and blue. Amar Rav Chisda, hamevashel bechameh tiberia b'Shabbat patur. So now back to our outline, we're going to the next thing. If you boil something without fire, how do you boil something without fire? Well, you don't need fire to heat up water. We have the hot springs of Tiberia, which, according to the note here, can get up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure if that's quite enough to cook it, but I guess if it's in there long enough. So if you cook the Korban Pesach in the Chameh Tiberia, this would be a different problem also because you're not allowed to remove the Korban Pesach from Jerusalem. So how are you going to get to Tiberia and then come all the way back? All right, but it means theoretically, if you had something that was, maybe we could apply this to microwaved or, nuclear powered heat. Anyway, but you're not using fire. The Rav Chisda says, B'Shabbat patur, Pesach shebishabol b'Chameh Tiberia hayav. If you cook something on Shabbat in hot springs, patur, because there's no fire. But if you did this if you cooked Korban Pesach in Chameh Tiberia chayav, even though there's no fire. Why? On Shabbat, fire cooking is defined as cooking with fire. If there's no fire, then it's okay, right? This is important law on Shabbat. If you cook just in the sun, only sun heat, so then you're actually allowed to cook on Shabbat if you only use sun heat. Pesach nameh lav todot Pesach nameh lav todot esh hu. But the korban. So how about korban Pesach? It's also we're not cooking it with fire. And so it should not be considered boiling. The answer is Amar Rava, Mai chayav de katane de ka'avar mishum sili esh. So you're right. You didn't boil it. You didn't violate bashel mevushal b'mayim. You didn't boil it, and you're not violating boiling in water because there's no fire. But you did violate sili esh. You violated the positive. It's stated as a positive. I wanted to show you the pasuk. What we have in essence is three laws in one pasuk. Do not eat it undercooked, boiled, or anything but roasted. Ki im seli esh, right? So it's actually a lav, a negative commandment. Don't eat it in any way that's not roasted. So since there's no fire and you use the hot springs, so that's not considered boiling. In other words, you wouldn't be liable to lashes from this clause, but you are liable according to the third clause. Okay, that's the difference. Very good. So okay, good. Rav Chia bered Rav Natan matne la lehad Rav Chisda behedya. Rav Chisda is the one that said this original law, and we had to discuss it, and Rav is the one that came to explain it. But actually, we have another version where Rav Chisda actually explained it. Behedya, Amar Rav Chisda. Probably Rav Chisda in the original is what this says. He didn't quite explain it, and later on they explained it. But then after that, as they're transmitting a statement, they added on the explanation. So it sounds like Rav Chisda said the whole thing. So this is the other version that's more full. Amar Rav Chisda b'Chameh Tiberia b'Shabbat patur u'Pesach shebishel b'Chameh Tiberia chayav shavar mishum seli esh. Cooking on Shabbat in Chameh Tiberia is patur because there's no fire. But cooking the Korban Pesach in Chameh Tiberia is chayav, not because it's called boiled, because no fire, but rather because you didn't roast it, and that itself is a lav, right? And would be chayav for that third clause, even though not for the second clause.
So it's particularly cooking it without fire, but raw doesn't fall into that, right? Because you didn't.
Maybe that. Very good. That answers you're answering your own question, right? If it's raw, you didn't cook it improperly because you didn't cook it. So you can't tell someone that you violated the prohibition against cooking it in any other way except right. Although I would say if you eat it, al tochelu mimenu, right? But the rabbis, I think, are just focusing on the cooking process itself, which you may not. Even if you don't eat it, just cooking it in an improper way, you're already chayav. So the rabbis are focusing on the cooking process itself. Okay, that's a very good point. Thank you, Sam. Amar Rava, achalo na. What if you did eat it? It does say eat it here, actually. Achalo na. If you did eat it undercooked, lokesh shetayim. You get lashes twice. Mevusha lokesh shetayim. Or if you boiled it, also twice lashes. Na umevushal, you did both. First you undercooked by roasting, and then you finished it off by boiling. Now you get 3 lashes. So why 2 or why 3? So based on this is a list of 3. If you did only na, you get na plus the third general one. If you did bashem vushal, you get lashes for the second clause plus for kiim sili esh for the general. If you did this and this, then you get lashes for all 3. So this is a 3-in-1 prohibition. That's the opinion of Rava. Abaye, however, disagrees. Abaye amad en lokin al lav shebichlalo. The general rule: you do not get lashes for a general prohibition, a prohibition that's stated in a general way. Don't do this whole category, but not specifying any exactly how to do it. You can't get lashes. It's not specific enough. Okay, what did Abaye mean by this? Do you not get lashes at all, or you get less lashes? It's 2 versions of what he means. Maybe he meant that you don't get 2 lashes, but you get 1, right? So you don't get lashes for the third generality, but for the first 2 you would get. Or, for example, if let's say chamet tiberia, right, which doesn't violate 1 or 2, but does violate the third, maybe you would get for that by itself. So you would get for something. Other interpret that you would not get lashes at all. Let's say you did in chamet tiberia, and that only violates the third clause. The third clause is a general clause. Therefore, it just says, do not eat it except for roasted. But that's just except for roasted. There are many ways to not roast something. And so you can't tell me that, oh, you've now violated for doing it this way. We learn this from the prohibition against chasima, against muzzling. That's where it says the whole law of lashes derives from here. And it says, do not muzzle an ox while it's treading. So that's a very specific thing. And so it has to be specified in order to require lashes, not a generality. Okay, that's Abaye's understanding. Similar application of this machloket. Rava amar achal zag lokesh shetayim, harsan lokesh shetayim, zag vecharsan lokesh shalosh. I'll show you this pasuk. This is regarding a nazir. For it says all the time of he's a nazir, anything from grapevine he cannot eat. And then it specifies mecharsanim, seeds, zad zag lo yochel, and skin. So if he eats seeds, he violated the first generality and the seeds. So he gets 2 lashes. If he has the third, if he has skin, then he violates skin plus the first one. He gets 2 sets of lashes. If he ate both seeds and skin, then he gets lashes 3 times for all 3. That is the opinion of Rava. However, Abaye disagrees. Amar Abaye en lokin alav shebichlelot. No, you do not get punished for a rule stated in general terms. And so what does that mean? Not punished at all, even in any case? means you don't get lashes twice, but you would get lashes once if you violated any single one of the clauses, or if you ate, let's say, like the grape leaves, you ate some yebra, which is not the skin and not the seeds, so it doesn't fall into one of the first two categories, but that by itself, you may get one. And others interpret this to mean that you would not get any lashes at all, let's say for eating grape leaves. Even according to this, it would seem that you get lashes for eating the seeds or the grape or the skin of the grapes, because it does specify those. All right, very good. So now back to our outline. That was a very interesting case of boiling without fire, and that led us into how many prohibitions would you violate, and is it multiple prohibitions? Is that considered all within the same category? Do you get the lashes for a general rule? Okay, now we're going to talk about eating undercooked before sunset. I'm going to show that that is not liable. Okay, this is going to involve a somewhat complex kal vachomer, but a very interesting one. So here's, we're going to see two versions of this braita. The first version just says the halacha, no derivation. Tanu Rabbanan, achal kezait na mi be'ojom patur. If you ate an undercooked, so we cooked the korban pesach on the 14th in the afternoon. That's not the time to eat the korban pesach. You're not allowed to eat the korban pesach during the day before sunset. We'll see that in a few minutes. But what if you do? And what if furthermore, you eat it not roasted, which is also not allowed before sunset, but you eat it undercooked before sunset? Patur. That's not the time for eating, so you don't violate yet. Kazait na mishechashecha chayav. However, if you ate a kazait of undercooked meat after it gets dark, then it is chayav. That's the time for eating. That's when you have to eat it roasted, not undercooked. Good. That's case one. Achal kezait salime be'odom lo pasal atzmo mibnei chabura. Korban Pesach, you have to join in a group. You have to pool your money, and we all buy a lamb together, and you have to register from beforehand into one group. You can't decide that night, oh, you know what, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to go to my in-laws. I'm going to go to my friend's house. No, you got to only go to the group that you designated. If you ate from someone else's group before Pesach starts, before sunset, then you did not remove yourself from the group that you actually registered. You shouldn't do that, but it's okay. You can still eat Korban Pesach with the one you registered for. However, if you did it after sunset, kazait salim misheh hashecha, right? If while you're going to your designated seder, someone invites you, hey, says, come and eat some of our korban pesach. Once you ate from someone else's group, now you can no longer join the group that you intended to join. Okay, we're not going to elaborate on the second halacha, but rather on the first. So that was braita number one. Second braita is going to derive this from a complex, actually the derivation is only just going to be from the pasuk, but we're going to say, why do we need a pasuk for all this? We could have thought the opposite from a kal vachomer. Tanya idach, yachol achal kazait na mibe'ojom yeheh hayav. Says, you might think that if you eat a kazait of undercooked Korban Pesach before sunset, you might have thought that you would be chayav. And therefore, we need a pasuk to come to say that you are not chayav. Why would you think that you would be chayav before sunset? Based on the following kal vachomer. V'dinhu, uma b'sha'a sheyeshno bekum echol sali, yeshno bebal tochal na. So at night, when you are allowed to eat it roasted, that's when we also say, do not eat it undercooked. So before sunset, when I may not eat it at all, not even roasted, all the more so I cannot eat it undercooked. The assumption is that after it gets dark, it's more permitted, right? Because it's dark and now I can eat it roasted. So if even when I can eat it roasted, I cannot eat it undercooked, for sure before sunset, when I cannot eat it at all, I for sure cannot eat it undercooked. So I might have thought, based on that, that's prohibited to eat it undercooked both before sunset and after sunset. Or I might even go further and say it's only prohibited before sunset. How so? Or lo, בשעה שאינו בקום אכול סלי, ישנו בבל תאכל נא. בשעה שישנו בקום אכול סלי, אינו בבל תאכל נא. Maybe at the time when I do not have to eat it, in other words, when I may not eat it before sunset, that's when I may not eat it roasted, I may not eat it raw. But at the time when I am allowed to eat it roasted, maybe I would say, there's no problem of eating it undercooked at that time. I know you're gasping. It's like, what? Eat it undercooked after sunset? Don't worry about that. Perhaps the whole point is once it gets dark and now you're allowed to eat it roasted, so now also the prohibition against eating it undercooked would be relaxed. And so in the night, I can eat it roasted, I can eat it undercooked. And so therefore you might think that the prohibition is only beforehand. Anyway, the difference between these is either I cannot eat it undercooked before sunset and after sunset, or maybe only before sunset. All these things I might have thought. However, the pasuk says all that's wrong. Talmud lomad al tochelu mimenu na ubasher muvushal mamayim ki im sili esh. I don't need the words ki im sili esh in the second pasuk because I already have them in the first pasuk. Right? The first pasuk says sili esh. So why do I need to say in the second pasuk again ki im sili esh? What's that repetition for? That repetition comes and adds lomad lecha b'shah sheyeshno bekum achol sali yeshno bebal tochal na. That the prohibition against eating it raw applies at the same time when I must eat it roasted at night. But those are connected, and therefore at a time when I may not eat it roasted before sunset, there is also no prohibition in eating it undercooked. So not that it's allowed, but that there would not be any punishment for that. Okay, that concludes that very interesting Kal Vachomer. And now we get to the case of boiling it before sunset. I know I can't boil it, but maybe it only means boiling it after sunset is the problem. So to be omed, ekra ani bashel. Matamod omar mevushal. So why do I need the double language bashel and mevushal? The B, we already had the B. He already explained this about fruit juice, but now he's learning something else. Sheyachol en li ela shebishelo mishechashecha. I might have thought that the prohibition against boiling is only at night. Beforehand, it's not seder time yet. I'm going to prepare beforehand. I'm going to prepare it by boiling. Maybe that'll be okay. Double language says not even before. Hold on, the B, you already used this pasuk. You already used it to say you cannot cook it in the empty pot or in fruit juice. So how could you use it twice? The Bavli has a rule. You can only use one pasuk for one law. Imken lemakeda or bashel or mevushal. My bashel mevushal shmat minah tarete. Actually, pasuk could have said the same word, same type of verb twice, the infinitive twice, or the future term, or the levashel, mevushal, or the passive twice. Instead, it uses two different forms of the verb, and that's how we can learn two different things, both the fruit juice law and the boiling it before sunset law. All right, good. Now, next baraita, tanura banan. Achal sali mebe'od yom. What if I roasted it properly before sunset, and I eat the roasted meat before sunset? Hayav. V'chazait na meshachashecha hayav. And also, if I eat it undercooked after it gets dark, also chayav. And these two seem to be linked. Katani sali dumya dena ma na belav af sali belav. So na is explicit, right? Al tochilu menu na. Do not eat it undercooked at night. That's for sure a lav, and you be chayav malkut. And so we compare that to eating it sali beforehand, too early. That's also a lav, also chayav malkut. So good. Now, bishlamana ketiv al tochelu menuna ela sali minalan. I know you're connecting them. They're connected in this baraita. But how do you know that they should be connected, right? So not eating it undercooked, that's explicit pasuk. But how do you know that you cannot eat it properly roasted before sunset? Eating it before sunset. Tichtib ואכלו את הבשר בלילה הזה, בלילה אין, ביום לה. Right, so that's from the previous pasuk, this one. Do not eat it בלילה הזה, sili esh. Right, eat it, and at night, sili esh. Therefore, eat it at night, sili esh, but not during the daytime, sili esh. Okay, you see, this is a misvat aseh, right? So, and we just said chayav, which is you're liable to lashes. You're only liable to lashes if you violate a lo ta'aseh, not from a bitul aseh, not from not doing a positive commandment. So that's what we're going to ask about next. V'hai lav haba mikelal asehu. V'chol lav haba mikelal aseh aseh. Right? This is actually a positive commandment. Eat it at night, roasted. And this is only, the prohibition is only inferred from the positive. Eat it roasted at night means don't eat it roasted during the day. But that's itself is an aseh. Even though I have to not do something in order to fulfill the aseh, it's still an aseh, and you should not be chayav. Amar Rav Chisda hamani Rabbi Yehuda detanya shor vaseh sarua vekalut nedaba taseh oto. So he's going to bring a comparison to this law that a bull or a lamb that has a mum, if it has a long limb or a short limb, you can still donate it to the Bet HaMikdash as a nedava, right? Taseh oto. Oto atamat pis lebedek habayit, v'atamat pis timimim lebedek habayit. So if it has a mum, then you can donate it just for its value, not as kiddushat damim, not kiddushat haguf. I donate this mum animal in Bet HaMikdash, and they will use its value. They can sell it, but I can't donate it as a korban. So that's this oto. Now I'm going to derive that since I have to, since I cannot donate something with the mum as a sacrifice, I can also learn the opposite. That if it's something does not have a blemish, then I may not donate it just for its value. A kosher, proper animal, if I donate it, it has to be as a sacrifice, not only for its value. Mekanamnu kol hamatpis timimim lebetek habayit ober be'aseh. And therefore, anyone who does consecrate a tamim, a good animal, and only for its value, violates in aseh. Now, en li ela ba'aseh velo ta'aseh minayin. So this just says I violated a positive commandment, but that doesn't I don't get a punishment for violating for not doing a positive commandment. So how do I know that there's also a lo ta'aseh? Because this pasuk in Vayikra Kaf Bet is introduced with the words Talmud Lomar Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. So the word lemor tells me that anything you find that's a positive commandment in that paragraph, I can switch it into a negative commandment. How do I do that? Amar lo Rabbi labar kapara. My mashma. What does he mean? What is Yehuda talking about there? Amar lo dichtiv lemor lo ne'emar bidvarim. Lemor is short for as a concatenation of two words. There is a law said here, lo amar, or another way of saying it, bera rav amri lemor lav emor. Say this is a lav, and so too. So just like here in Vayikra Kaf Bet, although the pasuk says you may donate a blemished animal for its value, and therefore you cannot donate an unblemished for its value, because that would violate an aseh. From the introduction of lemor, we also derive a lo ta'aseh. So too, and here in our case, because this entire paragraph is introduced with, right, go to Moshe and Aaron in Egypt, lemor, that the positive commandment that you must roast it also contains within it a negative commandment to roast it and eat it and roast it at night. That positive also contains a negative commandment: do not eat it during the day, and that would be liable to lashes if one indeed ate it during the day. Okay, and that concludes this section B of the Mishnah. This we're going to see a lot more about Korban Pesach in later chapters, but this was a little taste of it from now. Okay, we have a little bit more to go to finish the Perek. Do you want to finish it now, or leave it till tomorrow? You okay with now? All right, let's keep going and we'll finish the pedic. It's just only a few more minutes. Shouldn't take long. Me tashmisho shel nachtom. Okay, the water used by a baker, he has flour in his hands. He keeps dipping his hand in the water. Obviously, the water is going to have flour in it, so you gotta pour it out. Taneh hada. Shofchin b'makom midron. When you pour it out, you should pour it on an incline so that it will all go down and not collect in one place. If you pour it into a place that collects in one place, then it'll stay there and become chametz. That's one baraita. Another baraita says it's okay. You can pour it out in a place where it collects into a puddle. This is strange. How do we explain these two contradictory baraitot? La kasha, ha de nefishi de kavu, ha de la de nefishi de la kavu. So the baraita that says it's prohibited, that's we're talking about a large amount of water that's going to collect in one place, and that's going to be a problem. The one that said it's okay is talking about a little bit of water, and that will just be absorbed into the ground, and you don't have to worry about it. Okay, very logical. Amar Rav Yehuda, isha lo talush ela b'mayim shelanu. A woman should not knead dough except in water shelanu. Lalun means to sleep, water that rested. Why? When you first draw the water, it may be warm. And if it's warm water, it's going to cause leavening at a faster rate. You have to leave it overnight so it cools down, and then you can use it to make big masot. Okay, good. I know the word shelanu also, you have to pronounce it correctly. If you say shelanu, it means our water, and that would be confusing, which is exactly what happens in this fantastic, funny story. Derasha harav matana befafunya. So the matana gave a derashat, a big lecture to all the residents of the city of Pafunya, and he said this halacha, right? You have to use mayim shelanu. But either he didn't pronounce it correctly, or they misunderstood. And the next day, the next day, everybody brought their jugs to his house, right? And they said, okay, give us water, because they thought he meant you have to use our water, right? Mayim shelanu. He's selling this holy special water. So they're all waiting. Hablan maya, give us your water. Give us some water. No, I didn't mean that. I meant that it has to be rested water, right? You go and you can find it in your own house. Okay, clarified. And then they understood the halacha. All right, great story. Next, Tarash Rava. Rava also taught in a lecture. Isha, anything is taught in a public lecture, that's halacha l'maaseh. Isha lo talush bechama velo bechamechama. A woman should not knead the dough in the sun. The sun beating down on the dough is going to make it warm and going to make it leaven. Also, not with water that was heated by the sun, because that's going to be warm. Velo b'mayim hagirufin min hamulyar. And don't use water from the urn that was near the coals. It's going to be hot. Velo tegbia yihada min hatanur ad shetigmor et kol hapat. And do not stop baking until you finish all the dough. In other words, keep kneading it. This is a very important halacha. As long as you're kneading the dough, it doesn't rise. So keep kneading, keep working, right? Don't take a break until you finish baking all of the loaves. And you should have two vessels, one to mix the water and one to cool your hands. In other words, her hands, because they're working so much, might become warm, and you want to avoid that. So have another bucket of water to cool your hands off. Okay, good halachot about the water. Ibaya lehu, question. Abra velasha mahu. What if she transgressed and she did, in fact, make the dough with warm water? What do you do? Mozutra amar mutar, Rabashe amar asur. B'diavad, Mozutra said it's fine as long as it doesn't actually leaven. If you see it actually rose, obviously that would be a problem. So is this is this simply good guidelines? Good idea not to do it. Lechatechila don't, but b'diavad it's okay. Or are these like gezerot, right? Do not do this, and if you violate, then you have to throw out the masot. That's a machloket. What's the reasoning? Amar Mozutra mina amina la. Why do I say that? B'diavad it's okay. Tetanya en lotetin haseorin ba'pesach v'imlatat nitbaku asurim lo nitbaku mutarim. We saw this brayta before. You should not soak barley in water, because the water is going to go in and make it cause it to be chametz. Lechatechila, don't do it. If you did soak them in water, then check. If it's split apart, that means the water entered, the moisture entered, and there surely became chametz. But if you check it and it didn't split open, it's okay. So you see the same thing here. All these are proper guidelines that you should follow lechetechila. But b'diavad, it really just depends on, did it actually become chametz or not? That's Mozu Torah. Rav Ashi Amar, Atukulahu Hada Machita Machitinhu. This is what we're going to weave everything in the same act of weaving, right? You could apply the same principle all across the board. Only when they said explicitly, like in this baraita, that says you can check it and see if it broke open. It's like b'diavad, you can it's okay. If they said b'diavad, it's okay, then fine. But in this case, they didn't say b'diavad, it's okay. Rava got up, he made a rule. He said, everybody, you have to use cool water. Don't do it another way. So therefore, it's a gezerah. Don't do it that way, and therefore b'diavad, it also would be problematic. Hadran alach kol sha'a hazakim uberuchim. Baruch Adonai l'olam. Amen v'amen.